The idea really began that night 3 years ago when we were all sitting around in George and Ethel Griscom's backyard. We had just finished a big barbecue, and there wasn't much to do but swat mosquitoes and watch the fireflies. Anyhow, we got to talking about how to reach people with the gospel. Of course, we all knew the usual ways, but we were trying to think of something special when all of a sudden, it happened.
What do you know? Look. A blimp. I haven't seen one of those fly over here for years.
Well, that's because they don't use them much anymore. The Navy cut their appropriation for blimps.
Dear, do you think there's enough light for a picture?
Sure there is. You can see all right, can't you? Well, so can the camera.
Hey, Charlie, what are you doing? What are you doing? The blimp's over there, Charlie.
No, let him alone. You are now watching Charles R. Stebbins in action.
Just don't show a blimp. You gotta create a little atmosphere. Then you show the blimp.
Where's the blimp,
Hey, Charlie, put that away, Charlie. Now, what was I talking about?
Oh, were you talking?
You were talking about reaching people with the gospel, Herm.
Yes, that's it, Charlie. Well, as I was saying, we've got to face it. As Christians, we have a mission to reach the lost. Now, how do we go about it? Now, you take those people that live over there next door to George and Ethel. You can tell right off they're not Christians. Now, if there were only somebody
Herm, for goodness sake, keep your voice down.
Well, Herm's right. They're not Christians. They belong to a church, but they only go on Christmas and Easter. Other Sundays, they sit around, read the paper, work in the yard. In a few weeks, they'll be going to the shore every weekend until Labor Day. Ethel and I sure wish they could be reached with the gospel.
Well, as I said, there's the problem. Now, any suggestions?
Too bad the blimp didn't carry a sign. They stopped what they were doing and looked up at it.
Yes, they did. Potato chips, anyone?
Hey, you may have something there. Now, you've seen blimps with signs trailing, drink Pepsi-Cola and Chevrolet is first.
Say, Volkswagen sales are really increasing. Well, you know, I read just the other day...
Why not have a blimp with a Bible verse trailing? I can see it now. But to as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God, even to them that believe on his name.
I can see it, too. World's first vertical blimp, flying straight up and down.
Stop making fun, George. We could get a shorter verse.
I think it's a terrific idea. Everybody would get the gospel at the same time.
Except blind people and children who can't read.
Nothing is perfect, and it just might work.
But wouldn't it be awfully expensive? I mean, buying it and blowing it up and everything?
Say, isn't it about time for the Maxie Belden show?
Well, who wants to go and watch TV on a night like this? Oh, I guess if everybody else is going in, I may as well, too.
And that was the beginning of the whole thing. I thought you might like to see the pictures I took that night. I guess maybe they are kind of... But I felt these shots were sort of historic because it was such an important occasion. And I didn't miss anything either. I got the whole gang and the neighbors and the blimp. If it hadn't been for Herm, the whole idea probably would have dropped right then and there. But one day at our businessmen's fellowship luncheon, he brought it up for discussion and presented his idea on it. Herm's got a lot of drive. And, well, the men could see right away what a tremendous idea it was. Then old Mr. Jensen gave us a plot of land just outside of town for a hangar. That's my boy Tommy there. We got letterheads printed up right away, of course, and started letting people know just what we were doing by sending out newsletters. We still didn't know for sure if we could get a blimp. But we went ahead on faith anyway and started to build. It was wonderful to see how people really started getting behind the project with their gifts. And we knew that our step of faith had been honored when we finally got a letter from a surplus dealer saying he'd located one operational 200-foot lighter-than-air ship. Boy, that's when the work really began. Every night in the week, except Sunday, of course. The only time I saw my kids was at breakfast. That was the year we celebrated Christmas 5 days late. Well, at least the tree didn't cost anything.
The camera! The tree! The camera! Get the button off that camera!
There were a million things to decide, like the name, for instance. We'd all been calling it Gospel Blimp, but we decided to make it Blimps, in case the idea should spread, you know. Then Herm decided we'd better incorporate, otherwise we'd be personally responsible, for the finances, that is. Then Herm got to thinking about the idea spreading. He said, well, if it might spread, why not be sure and take care of all eventualities from the start? And so we did. Boy, that blimp was a beauty. Herm said it reminded him of a perfect sausage. Oh, it was right about this time that Herm quit his job in the meatpacking plant to go full-time with IGBI. One thing about Herm, he was willing to sacrifice. Boy, was that blimp ever big. And as it moved restlessly in the wind that day, you could just feel it was waiting to get up there in the sky and start preaching the gospel. Well, it was a great day. Everybody was there. The mayor gave a speech. The mayor's the first dignitary I ever photographed. I was a little bit nervous, but I think I got a pretty good shot of him. Even the mayor seemed to notice my work. And then the head of the local ministerium association brought greetings. Of course, that was before the persecution. But the thousands of people who turned out that day were really waiting for the big moment, the christening. And finally, it came. That's Herm's little girl there with the bottle. And that's 7-Up in the bottle. Now, here we go.
Well, she's all dedicated, and tomorrow we fly. Yeah, men, it's been a long pull.
You think we have enough firebombs here, do you, Herm?
No, you better keep rolling, Charlie. How many do you think we have, George?
About 2,000, I think.
Good.
Fire bombs. Boy, that's a great name for them, Herm.
They do sort of look like fire when you get a whole bunch of them together.
It'll be like a revival fire coming down out of the sky. Say, they won't hurt anyone if they hit them on the head, will they, Herm?
No, I checked that out. All right, men, let's go over the old checklist. Now, let's see. George, how about the map?
We'll have it.
All right, compass?
We'll have it.
Telescope?
We'll have it.
Weather?
We'll have it. I mean, it's been checked out, Herm.
Provender?
Provender?
He means food.
George will drop the thermos and the lunch is off on the way to work.
Check. Well, I guess that's about it. Anything I've forgotten?
Parachute.
Parachute.
What can that be?
I'll go. Oh, hello. Come on in. By the way, thanks for doing my lawn.
Don't mention it. Oh, say, I didn't realize you had company. Next door neighbor.
No, perfectly all right. What can I do for you?
Well, Doris and I are going to the beach next Saturday, and we wondered if you and Ethel might not like to join us. We'd like to have you if you can make it.
Well, say, that's very nice, but I'm terribly sorry. These are pretty busy days for us around here, you know. On Saturday morning, we've got a breakfast prayer meeting. On Saturday afternoon, we have a full IGBI committee meeting. And I'm afraid we just can't fit it in.
But thanks very much.
Sorry you can't make it. Maybe next time. Night.
Boy, if only we can reach them through this thing, it'll be worthwhile. All that time and money.
In a way, they're the reason we started this whole thing, aren't they?
But it can't fail. They can read, can't they? Well, tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock sharp, they're going to see the gospel in the sky right up over their house. I promise you, George, as General Director of International Gospel Blimps Incorporated. And not only your next-door neighbors, but the whole block. My block. In fact, every block in the city. But we'll start with your block, George. Somehow it only seems right.
What verse are you going to use first, Herm?
Oh, that would be telling, Charlie. But you'll see bright and early tomorrow morning. Well, everybody, I think we better call it a night.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Charlie.
Say, did you manage to get time off from work tomorrow?
Yeah, I had no trouble.
Good boy. You be sure to get a good shot of that blimp up over George and Ethel's house. Okay, boy?
I got up bright and early and got the shot of the blimp like Herm told me to. There it was, pulling those big, beautiful letters. Why, the gospel could be seen for blocks. I guess maybe it was too early for anyone to be out looking at it. So I decided to get some crowd reaction shots at noontime when Herm brought the blimp downtown during lunch hour. I took a shot out the office window, and still nobody was looking up. Little did I realize we were almost finished with the blimp at that very moment. It seems that Herm and that pilot we'd hired had been just cruising along over the rooftops when all of a sudden there was this tremendous jolt. Next thing they knew, they were losing altitude, but fast. It must have been a frightening experience. And there was this poor woman making her bed when all of a sudden, all the light from outside was extinguished. Boy, it seemed like everybody in town was there, including the men from the TV station.
I had to get cats out of trees and kids out of locked bathrooms, but this is the first time in my life I've ever had to get two guys off a blimp, and I tell you, it's the biggest waste of the taxpayers' money, and these guys are a bunch of...
Herm said he used some other language, too, which was a good opportunity for a witness. But we learned a lesson that first day. This job couldn't be done overnight. And we knew there'd be opposition. After all, the enemy had already tried to ruin the blimp. So we started prayer meetings for the safety of the blimp and those whose lives would be constantly endangered by flying it. After the rip was repaired, Herm got the thing running on a regular schedule. We had to let the first pilot go. He was sort of undependable. But we really got a wonderful replacement, a young married fellow who'd been considering the mission field. In fact, he'd applied for Africa or somewhere. But with his wife's help, we convinced him that this was much more strategic. And we let him use Saturday afternoons as mission time. Believe me, it sure was a thrill to see that big old blimp cruising along with a verse you could read a mile off. Somehow you just knew that people were going to be reached by the gospel blimp. Well, if we couldn't get people to look up any other way, we always had the fire bombs. These little gospel tracts we wrapped in cellophane and put in baskets for the commander to drop from the blimp. He called this the moment of truth. Oh, Herm thought we should call him Commander now. seemed a little more dignified. The kids were real excited over the bombs. I think someone started the rumor there was bubble gum in them. But we knew the gospel was getting into places it had never been before. After a few weeks, the excitement sort of died down. But whenever we got a new tract, the commander made sure he always dumped some on George's next-door neighbor's lawn. The commander never forgot. Not that the Griscoms had any encouragement to report along that line.
No, there's nothing new, Charlie. Nothing new so far as her getting saved is concerned. But she hasn't been well. I think she's in the hospital. We see him over there eating alone at night. Always a bottle of beer, sometimes two.
I wonder what hospital she's in.
I don't know. I'll tell George you were here for the power drill. Say, how's the sound system coming?
Oh, we got a few bugs to work out yet, but we're almost ready to roll.
You know, the Woman's Auxiliary is concerned about shut-ins and blind people, children who can't read yet, and people who are nearsighted. Are you sure they're going to be able to hear it?
Are you kidding? Why, with 100-watt output and 3-cone speakers, they'll be able to hear it anywhere, even in the basement.
Now hear this. Good evening, people of Middletown. This is Commander Hermanson speaking to you from the Gospel Blimp. We trust that each and every one of you will truly enjoy our program this evening. Now listen while our youth time chorus, made up of boys and girls from your community, sing, I have the joy, 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 joy down in my heart.
We made the newspapers next morning, and we were really thrilled with that. One of the papers was a bit critical, though. An editorial called the right to peace and quiet. But even that kind of opposition pretty much died out when we agreed to turn the volume down. People came to accept the Blimp. Fact is, there was a sort of a community pride about it. We still had a new thing or two up our sleeves, like the different language nights we had for the foreign sections of town. But it was on one of these foreign language nights that the roof really fell in. Oh, boy. No one knows how it happened, not even the FCC. But all of a sudden, on everybody's TV set, on the Maxie Belden show of all things, the picture was Maxie Belden, all right. But the sound was coming from the Blimp in Polish.
Tego pięknego miasta. Przemawiamy do was Gospel Blimp. Mamy, że te pół godziny programu muzycznego oraz pogadanka religijna, którą przygotowaliśmy dla was, dadzą wam zadowolenie. Dobry wieczór państwu. Witamy was z okazji tego specjalnego programu, który przygotowany został dla naszych przyjaciół.
You see what's happening on TV? It's terrible.
Program otwieramy znaną pieśnią Daj mi religię z dawnych lat.
I'm sorry.
Którą
Goodbye.
śpiewa jeden z waszych sąsiadów, pan Jan Rudkowski.
Hello.
Oto on.
No, the commander's not here. I'm sorry. Goodbye.
Daj mi z dawnych lat religią, daj mi z dawnych lat religią, daj mi z dawnych lat religią. Ona mi wystarczy dobra, i
I'm sorry.
Ona sprawia, że kochasz, ona sprawia, że kochasz, ona sprawia.
Shut that thing off!
Kochasz, ona mi wystarczy.
Hey, turn that thing off!
Bag out of the air.
Now, to summarize. 1, I've engaged the services of Mr. Waterman here as our Director of Public Relations. 2, we get a new pilot. 3, that PA system has got to go. We certainly don't want a repetition of what happened last night. Now, let's get our chins up off the floor, men. We'll get the victory. Now, any questions?
Herm, that statement of yours in the paper.
Yes, George?
Well, Herm, you didn't really say that, did you?
Well, yes, George, substantially.
But, Herm, it says, I want to express my sincere regret that I had to be out of town last evening when certain irresponsible actions of International Gospel Blimps Incorporated came to an unfortunate climax. If I had been there, this never would have happened. I promise there will never be a repetition of last night's fiasco. Well, you really didn't say that, did you, Herm?
I wonder if I could put in a word here, Commander. I'd like to explain why we issued that statement. You see, it's hard to sell an idea, or a corporation, even a non-profit one. It's much easier to sell a man, especially a man like the commander here. Well, once you sold the people on the man who represents the idea, then you've got to see to it that they never lose confidence in him. Now, they can lose confidence in the idea and the corporation. And with all due respect to you fine men, they can even lose confidence in the members of the board. But there's one person in whom they must never lose confidence. And that is the commander, the symbol of IGBI.
So you decided to sell the rest of us down the river.
Now, that's not fair, George, if you don't mind my saying so. Which is more important, you or the blimp? After all, George, you have more at stake in this than the rest of us. It's your next-door neighbor we've been giving special attention to. I've asked for no special thanks from you for all that I've done. As a matter of fact, I've sacrificed a great deal without much appreciation. And when something like this comes along, you can hardly blame me for expecting just a bit of loyalty from you fellows.
Actually, it was a godsend that the commander was out of town last night. Now, if he had been here, everybody would have known that he couldn't do any more than anyone else to correct the situation. And at all costs, we must preserve the image of the commander as a man that's in complete control in every situation.
Would you lie to do that?
That's a nasty word, George. And it's hardly a Christian attitude. I think we ought to be mighty grateful for the fine job Bill Waterman did.
Well, I guess there's nothing more to discuss, is there?
Just this. Now, sit down a minute. Now, if any of you fellas aren't happy with the way that I've been running things, well, for the sake of our testimony as a Christian organization, I think you should carefully reconsider your position on the board. Nobody is indispensable. That's all, men.
We were sorry to lose George, but as Herm said, he just didn't fit in with the group anymore. Well, that's progress. First thing that public relations man did was make Herm grow a beard. He said it would help his image. You had to hand it to that PR guy. He really knew his stuff. And like Herm said, he always knew what was right. More and more, he built up the commander in the public eye as the personification of the blimp. He made sure everything Herm did was news, like dropping the millionth firebomb. And we made the newspapers and even the magazines all the time. He even got Herm interviewed on television, coast to coast. As I stood in the wings taking these movie shots, I felt proud that I could be a small part of this great work. The PR man figured the commander should live in a better neighborhood so he could start meeting people whose influence really counted. And of course, we had to move into new offices to keep up with Herm's new position. Herm had to spend most of his time that summer speaking at Bible conferences. He had quite a ministry, especially in getting young people to give their lives for full-time service. He talked a lot about sacrifice, how they shouldn't hold back, but go straight ahead, whatever the cost. He practiced what he preached. He was even willing to leave his family for long periods of time. It's easy to see why the Lord prospers a man like Herm, who is willing to make a sacrifice. Things couldn't have been going more beautifully, but there was one cause for concern.
What's the matter, Charlie?
I just saw George Griscom.
Oh, how is George?
I drove past his house on the way home. Thought I'd drop by and get him caught up on the blimp. He's on his way to the shore with that neighbor fellow.
Ethel, too?
No, just George and that fellow. I'm a little worried about George. I'm sure there was beer in that cooler. You know how it is when you get away from Christian fellowship with a worldly crowd.
Oh, George is all right, Charlie.
I don't know. I think we better bring him up for prayer at Sunday's meeting. At any rate, I'm sure glad he's not on the board anymore. Take just one guy who's not living a separated life to put that blimp on the skids. Just one guy. Herm thought I should throw this picture of him away, but I kept it because it turned out to be prophetic. It was this very day he was playing golf at the country club and the blimp accidentally flew over. The pilot wasn't supposed to fly over the club. Herm said the distraction bothered the golfers. But this one day, the pilot must have forgotten, and the blimp went over anyhow. Herm was playing with the head of Dunleavy Sanders Advertising Agency and the director of the Chamber of Commerce and the treasurer of National Steel. And these men had been looking for a chance to talk to Herm because they thought the blimp was a good idea, but that we had been taking full advantage of it. They said if we would only make the blimp available to other groups, it could ease our load financially. Of course, when Herm presented these ideas to the board, they didn't want to change the blimp. People might think it was a compromise. But Herm said it wasn't a question of compromise, just a new emphasis. And after all, why couldn't the blimp carry two signs as well as one? These men wanted to help the community, just like we did. And these signs might give us some real status in the community. Besides the fact that the finances would be a big help to the blimp's ministry. Well, that convinced the board members. And that was the beginning of the new gospel blimp. George didn't know it, but we were watching him. I took this picture as a reminder of how far away you can get from the basic principles of the blimp. It was a mystery to us how he could spend so much time with that unconverted neighbor. His life looked pretty shabby. But things were going great for us. Herm saw to it that the board was enlarged so our new friends could be included on it. They had all sorts of practical help, like the latest word on projected donations and business trends and other factors like market research and motivational studies, so our choice of verses could be positive, not hit or miss anymore. when you come right down to it, about all we'd done before was pray about it. But from then on, the Blimp was really organized. We finally found a way to attract attention without offending anyone. And then George called and invited us all over. Said something about his neighbor.
You remember, the thing that got us to thinking about evangelizing our city was our next-door neighbors. They were sitting right over there that night.
So that's why you asked us over here. That was exactly 3 years ago tonight.
Well, that wasn't the only reason. In the past 3 years, there's been a lot of prayer that these neighbors would become Christians. Tonight, we invited you here because, well, to cut it short, God has answered our prayers. They're Christians now.
Well, terrific. What verse of scripture was it?
Was it a firebomb?
Was it while the PA system was being used?
Was the verse in electric lights?
It wasn't the Blimp.
Oh, you mean the Blimp didn't save you, the Lord saved you.
No, I mean God didn't use the Blimp. Listen, I can't tell you how many times I cussed out that blasted Blimp. That trash on the lawn, in the rain gutters.
But we were praying so hard. Certainly God must have used the Blimp some way.
He did, but not in the way you think. It was really George and Ethel he used. But not while they were spending all their time on the Blimp. Well, we've already told them. I guess we can tell you. We thought they were lousy neighbors.
Lousy neighbors? You should have heard them pray for you at our prayer meetings.
We did, but we still thought they were lousy neighbors. Like, we'd invite them over for an evening, have tickets for a hockey game or something. But no matter what it was, they never had the time. They only had time for the Blimp.
He's right.
Sorry, George. I didn't mean to make it so strong.
No, don't back down. That's exactly the way we were.
But we're glad you're not just neighbors now, but friends.
Well, we don't want to keep you too long. We promised you we'd break up early.
Oh, wait a minute, George. I haven't told them how we became Christians.
Oh, yes, you have.
Oh, no, wait a minute, George. Let's hear what he has to say.
It won't take long. And, well, there's something else I want you to know. The last thing in the world I want you to do is leave thinking that we're criticizing George and Ethel. Why, they've been Christ himself to us ever since that second time Doris went to the hospital.
Ethel came to see me every day. I was really terribly discouraged. But she'd bring some flowers from the garden. And she'd sit and talk to me, and sometimes just listen. She'd read to me, and she talked about Jesus Christ. I'd never met anyone before to whom he was real. I know it seems strange, but I hadn't.
I was feeling pretty low, too. But George and Ethel had me over for dinner every night. And I was struck by the same thing. They were sold on being Christians. They weren't just putting on a show for my benefit. Like just before Doris came home from the hospital. Man, our house was a disaster area. Ethel came in the day before, and she gave it the going over of its life.
And for a month after I came home, she did all my washing and ironing.
That's about it. Well, we could tell you more. Well, like the times George went down to the beach with me on Saturday. Even when he knew I had beer in the cooler. Well, I knew how he felt about drinking, but he wasn't a holy Joe about it. You know, if you had been, I probably never would have been interested in doing anything with you. We'd probably never become Christians.
Well, that certainly is interesting. Well, I've got a big day tomorrow. I've got to plant some shrubs around the hangar. I think we'd better be going now.
Been quite an evening. Thanks so much, Ethel.
Wonderful to find that God has answered prayer. He never fails, does he?
Say, if you don't have anything important to do tomorrow, how about coming out to the hangar and working on the Blimp with us?
Well, thanks, Charlie, but I do have something important to do tomorrow. George and I are going bowling with the guy across the street.
Oh.